Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, Mindset Elevation Coach and publisher of the beloved Aspire magazine. Since 2006, Aspire has been inspiring women to live deeper, more intentional, and authentic lives from the inside out. If content like that speaks to you, I invite you to grab your free subscription at subscribe2aspire.com. We'll be waiting for you, my friends. Have you ever asked yourself questions like, why am I so unlucky in love? How do I know if my partner is the one? Is my twin flame really out there somewhere? Today, spiritual astrologer and author Kate Rose will empower you to answer those questions and more in this inspiring conversation as she explains how our astrological birth chart reveals the wounds and lessons in love that we are destined to learn and grow from in this lifetime. Kate Rose is the author of Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships, as well as her first book, You Only Fall in Love 3 Times. As a therapist, relationship expert, spiritual intuitive, and astrologer, Kate uses the stars to help her clients clarify their purpose and recognize the blocks that are keeping them from living the life they are destined to live. She holds an MS in clinical art therapy from Springfield College and writes regular columns for Your Tango, Elephant Journal, and her newsletter, Unedited. Be sure to visit her at wordsofkaterose.com. Kate, I am so glad that you're here today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Linda. I am so excited to be here.
I have to tell you, I'm really drawn to the cover too of your book, the colors, the energy, the vibe. I'm a very visual person, so when I learned about your work and then saw the cover and received the book, I'm like, oh my God, you can just feel the intention here. And I'm excited to talk about it because there's a lot of our astrological chart holds so much information, doesn't it?
It really does. And I thank you so much for the feedback about the cover because that's how I feel about it. That's what the hope was. And I'm a very visual person as well. So thank you. It's to feel the energy in a book, I think is an important piece to maybe seeing if it's calling to us or not. And the astrology component, I mean, when I speak with people, I kind of always say this isn't necessarily the type of the astrology that's going to tell you when you're going to get rich, but it is going to be able to give you that keys for yourself to be able to figure out and understand what can we work on individually in order to have that love and even the life that we're wanting.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing and from what I've read so far in the book, it's like you use the birth chart as a personal development tool to help people go deeper into their truth. Am I understanding that correctly? And the lessons and the wisdom within that chart. And that's what I love is the depth.
And there was a couple people that had read it that I know, and I was like, okay, does it make sense? Because I feel like so much there is so much depth and so much information in it. And yes, that is exactly what it is. And it's using the framework of the 3 relationships for that development of the self, because each relationship that we enter into in our lifetime really does reflect and speak to a particular phase of our own development. And so by being able to understand what the purpose is and being able to open the astrology chart and figure out perhaps we need to develop more self-love, or maybe we need to work on boundaries more, we're then able to transform ourselves, and then that radiates into our life.
And that's so powerful. So why don't we start with that? Because the name of the book is Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships. So let's talk about that. So you share there's three kinds of relationships, which of course you wrote about in the book. How about a quick overview of what each of those mean?
Absolutely. So the first love that we have is the soulmate. And the soulmate relationship is usually one that we get into earlier on in our life, whether it's our high school sweetheart, a college love, or even someone into our 30s. The soulmate relationship is really characterized by similarities. That person is part of our similar soul family. It can be from a similar background, location, even just being raised with similar beliefs. And so we enter into this relationship, but ultimately, if we choose to continue to kind of progress on the path of our own growth, ultimately that relationship would need to be transitioned out of as we make the choice to kind of discover what is our truth apart from how we were raised or who we thought we would eventually be with. Um, at that point in our kind of journey, we're just figuring out who we are, but we're also feeling really empowered because we were able to transition out of the soulmate, which is usually known as the love that looks right. At that point, we're craving excitement. We're willing to try new things. We want to have a lot of passion, and we're truly believing and wanting to believe that there is a destiny, there's a fate at play in our lives. And in that situation, we end up actually attracting our karmic partner. And our karmic partner, the sole purpose is to not help us discover our truth, like the soulmate, but to help us heal our childhood wounds and conditioning, even some of the generational karma that maybe has been handed down through previous generations. A lot of times the karmic relationship can feel very addictive. It can feel like it was meant to be, and it was, but not to necessarily last forever. And so many times the karmic is kind of known as the love that we wished was right, at least at one point. When we leave our karmic relationship, what helps us transition out of that is ultimately the healing or being in the healing process of many of our childhood wounds, self worth in particular, realizing that we are worth consistency and a healthy relationship and being loved for all that we are. And so we ultimately end up choosing ourselves and we transition out of that relationship. And many times we're finally enjoying being single for maybe one of the first times in our lives. We're feeling more secure in who we are. We're not sensing a lack within ourselves. And at that point, we end up attracting the twin flame into our life, whether it's a new individual or someone that we previously knew. And the idea of the twin flame relationship is that it's both people who have been through the lesson of the truth with the soulmate and many of their own inner child healing and generational healing. And so when they come together, they're able to approach the relationship in a very different way that is very kind of indicative of having stepped into or embraced that healing adult self. And so it's that healthiness of love that actually makes it feel so magical.
I just love I have so many notes. I'm like, oh, slow down.
I love it.
Well, you know what I love too is as you were sharing the definitions of each one, um, I could, as I'm taking notes, I could feel myself connecting to a past relationship.
Mm,
I could see the lessons there, especially the comic about the childhood wounds. I could
yes.
know exactly what that relationship was. And now, as you described twin flame, I've been with my honey, going to be 30 years.
Ah, isn't
And
that beautiful?
yeah, and the beautiful part is as you was I remember meeting him, and we were about 6 months in, and I remember saying something like, because I had taken a little hiatus, which you
Mhm.
said
Yep.
healing means we choose ourselves. So after
Exactly.
my karmic relationship, I chose to, for 19 months, not to date or see anyone, and it was the
Mhm.
most healing experience, and then I met him about 22 months later. But I remember saying to him, "Oh my God, I wasted 19 months. We could have been together sooner
Ah.
because we had met before, Kate." And his words to me were, "No, you wouldn't have been ready for a relationship like this if we met." 19 months ago. And I never forgot those words. And now, hearing your description, I could see that I think I had to personally go through that whole cycle that you just so beautifully described my life, and to be ready to receive something
Yes.
as wonderful as I have.
And Linda, so first of all, I mean, when I speak with people, no one usually ever really wants to hear that being single is actually a good thing. Many people become afraid of being alone, or what if I don't ever find anyone? But being single and enjoying it and seeing it as a gift is actually such a huge part of our development, because usually the time that we do that is at the point where we're finally in our own space, not necessarily a home, but at times, but really our own space of ourself, of our soul, of finally feeling into all that makes us whole and who we are. And when you had said that aspect of receiving this next relationship that you have been in for so many wonderful decades, I'm sure that word just stuck out to me, because that's what I always say the twin flame represents, is that the biggest aspect, every relationship has lessons, but the twin flame is one that really requires us to receive, and in a way that we never had previously in any other relationship.
Yeah, and I always tell him, I go, "You're such a he's so wise, and he has done the
Mhm.
emotional work. He has gone through those same lessons I have." And I wanna say that 19 months was the best thing I did for myself and the hardest thing I did for myself.
Mhm.
I had been in relationships nonstop since I was 15, all long
Yep.
term. So the thought of, "What?" it was this inner knowing that's what I needed. And I wanna be transparent, ladies. For probably 5 of those months, I couldn't sleep up in my big bed alone because it felt
Mhm.
so lonely. So I slept on the sofa just so I could feel something behind me, the back of the sofa. And
Mhm.
so it was the greatest gift I ever gave myself. And I know if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been ready for Dana, for my honey. He is extraordinary. So, Kate, we could keep going. I'm going to take a quick break and then we're going to dive even deeper into this conversation. We'll be
Perfect.
back in a moment, my friends. I invite you to visit Kate at wordsofkaterose.com. We'll be back in a moment.
Inspiration for a Woman's Soul. Aspire Magazine, inspiring and supporting women on the path of self-discovery. Claim your free digital subscription today, which includes access to thousands of dollars of personal development bonus gifts from Team Inspiration partners. Claim your Aspire Magazine subscription today at subscribetoaspire.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. With me today is Kate Rose, author of Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships. And I am so enjoying this conversation, I almost forgot to go to break. So, Kate, when you talk about the receiving of the flame, that's the word that energetically came up for me because that's what it felt like. And so, if someone's listening now, because we have a global audience and women of all ages, if they're in the middle of a karmic relationships, I remember just based on your description, when I was in that relationship, I really thought, let me think, find the right words. I really thought it was the one at the
Mhm.
beginning.
Yep.
But how do you know you're in a karmic relationship? Like if you want to look at the relationship you're in right now, is there a way to identify it as you're experiencing it?
There are a couple of different ways. So one, the how this book Written in the Stars came about is that in talking with people, we can ask questions and we can guide self-reflection, but many times we need that right in front of us, kind of written down quite literally in black and white. And so what it comes down to is, let's say, the astrological way to determine if you're in a karmic is being able to compare the birth charts of yourself, the partner in question, along with your parents or perhaps caregivers. And what you're looking for is to see, is there a strong crossover with your partner and your parents or caregivers, especially, let's say, around Venus, which represents love, or Mercury and how you're being spoken to, or even Jupiter, which represents more of our future that we're hoping to attain. Especially when it comes to, let's say, the more challenging or a challenging parental relationship. The more crossover, meaning, let's say, similar placement with your partner and your parents, that's telling you that this relationship was called into your life not to last forever, but to help you heal what perhaps you didn't even know that you were hanging on to all this time. Some of the other, let's say, guided self reflection questions is I always ask, is there anything in this relationship that looks or even feels the way that you did when you were a child? And many times we will repeat patterns as far as the type of person we're attracted to, or trying to get that love from emotionally unavailable people if we didn't feel loved as a child. The other question to ask is, does it ever actually consistently improve? Most often with the karmic, it's a very up and down kind of type of cycle. It might get better periodically for, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks at a time, but then it will fall off again. And so the idea is no matter what you do, the karmic will only ever end the same. And especially if you can identify that there's, let's say, similarities to your childhood. And then obviously with the astrology, that is the biggest indicator that this is a relationship that still, like you said, it was meant to be. It's fated. You were supposed to be in this, but it was one to help you learn, not to have you remain in for the rest of your life.
Again, I'm going back to that comic relationship I had,
Me
and
too, Linda.
yes, and I'm sitting there going, "Wow, it's so true." And I have no regrets. I was married to him, and I see now the tie, and I've always seen it. We've been apart for probably 35 years. But he was a key relationship in my life. But now that I'm looking back and revisiting this conversation with you, I can see it was a mirror to my father relationship, passive aggressive, emotionally
Yep.
unavailable, good person, you know what I mean? Great in so many ways, but I healed such a big part of me when I chose myself and then took that
Exactly.
19 months. People thought I was crazy for leaving because from the outside in, it looked like we had it all, but
Of course.
it was all it wasn't true on the inside, for myself especially. So that really speaks to me because that one relationship that came up at the first segment we did, I see now you're right. It was to help me heal childhood wounds. And again, I have no regrets. Um, I'm glad that relationship came into
Mhm.
my life.
Well, and I think it's important. I feel exactly the same way, and mine was actually all about my father wound as well. My father was schizophrenic until his death, but growing up, and so I didn't, even though logically I knew that he loved me in the ways that he could, I didn't actually feel loved. And I didn't feel, let's say, chosen in the way that many daughters might, let's say, hopefully be chosen and cared for by their fathers. And so that was my lesson. But reaching a point of gratitude for what you went through and what you experienced is essential because while I always say that there's no love that's kind of quote unquote better than the other, the karmic relationship really is the one that changes us. It changes our lives for the better. Without the karmic, there is no possibility of the twin flame or third love. So there should be a lot of gratitude for the karmic and being able to realize we don't need to point fingers or have it be somebody's fault necessarily, but just being able to be grateful that we reached that moment where we could choose ourselves because for myself, for you during those 19 months, it's about processing, it's about learning to be alone, it's about being with our own self. But I think there's a huge part as well that's really about giving ourselves time to actually fall in love with ourselves.
Yeah, this is really speaking to me because that's what you talk a lot about in the book, that the
Mhm.
journey of love is really about the self. So let's talk about that a little deeper. What do you mean by that?
So, what I kind of have been able to learn and understand about relationships is that while we have these three types of love in our life, we may fall in love 8, 9, 12 times, but in reality, each one of those loves is only one of those three, the soulmate, the karmic, and the twin flame. is that actually those relationships really end up actually representing a phase of our own identity and self. And so, again, that goes back to that aspect of everything that we attract into our lives is a mirror of where we're at. And so, the soulmate relationship is very similar to that aspect of the child phase where we are just continuing on with whatever conditioning or whatever we were taught, whatever we were expected to do in childhood. The karmic relationship, because we're feeling a little bit more emboldened and we're a little bit more courageous, maybe a little bit more risk taking after we leave our soulmate. The karmic relationship is really indicative of that teenager phase where we have to do something different and we have to learn and we have to, at times learn to choose ourselves or how to be by ourselves. And then that twin flame relationship really is that healing adult self. So while each relationship might mirror our wounds or our beliefs about love or what we were taught, it also really actually represents three important phases of our own development.
And this to me is what I felt like it was going from the inside out. Like when I
Yes.
took that 19 months, looking back now, I go, it was about me going from the inside out and asking myself how I could love myself more and why would I have settled? Like some of my questions for myself during that
Mhm.
19 months is what wound in you would have led you to settle for someone passive aggressive, etc. So I did a lot of deep work to clear that, but that really comes back around to what you just said. It's about loving the self, right?
It's loving ourselves and giving ourselves that grace, and I think that understanding. Many times when I speak with people, that idea of loving ourselves sometimes seems so obscure. It's hard to necessarily understand what it means. And I say, in an ideal situation, if we are loving ourselves, we are speaking for and caring for ourselves as we would a child or our own children in our lives. So if we're not going to say that to a niece or a nephew or even a friend's child or our own, or care for them in such a way, then we shouldn't be doing that to ourselves.
I love that. One of my former clients, she's a psychologist. I remember she was struggling with something, and I remember saying to her, "Would you have said that to your best friend, Mary?" She goes, "Of
Mhm.
course not." I go, "Then why are you saying it to yourself? Your soul is listening." And I use that with my clients now because I had to use it on myself many times.
Well, and that's what I always say is I always tell everyone I'm never going to say or suggest something that either I haven't had to do or I wouldn't do myself. And it is all personal and everything, it is like you said, it's you kind of put a warning out. It's not always easy being by yourself. And I remember nights, especially in my kind of, real alone period that I consciously chose, holding myself before bed, saying that you are loved, reminding myself of that, practicing those affirmations. And it's not easy. It doesn't always feel good in the beginning, but the benefits of it are incredible because it doesn't just feel good to love and know yourself, but it truly does change what we attract into our life and even how we go about living.
Yeah, it was really big for me too. And if a woman's listening right now and you're struggling in your relationship, I'll be honest, that when I left that marriage, it was the hardest thing I did.
Mhm.
And I honestly, there was something so strong in me. I wasn't strong enough to leave for myself, Kate. At that time, I really wasn't.
Mhm.
But I had a biological daughter
Mm.
who, at the time I left, 8 years old, and two stepchildren that were 3 and 11, and they were my world. And I kept looking at the girls, especially, saying, "Oh my goodness, this is not the relationship I want them to mirror in their own life. And this is not the relationship I want my stepson to see as a man that you be passive aggressive
Mhm.
and everyone has to walk on eggshells. And again, a good man just wasn't healed. And I left for that reason. And that my daughter's now 40 and has attracted an amazing husband and family. And I look back and say, even though maybe at the time I left, I didn't love myself enough to leave, I loved my kids enough to leave and do the hard work. so I could show a healthy relationship to them and show them that they are worthy of loving themselves. And my daughter, we've had now we can have adult conversation.
Of
She said,
course.
you know, that was one of the best gifts you ever gave me.
Mm.
Yeah, and
Well,
see that was life come full circle. Her and I had that conversation
how
probably a decade
beautiful.
ago when she was around 30. And so for everyone listening, those that have children, they're always watching, they're always listening, and they're learning about relationships from us. And I didn't want to repeat the family relationships. And
And
so that was basically,
actually, Linda, I made the same choice for the exact same reason. When I was leaving my marriage, I was not strong enough to leave it for myself. And I left for my two daughters, same thing, of knowing that if I remained, that this was going to be what their future was. And I wanted something different and better. And so I didn't love myself enough in that moment to leave, but I loved my children to know that they deserved more. And I never wanted them to be in that situation. So truly very meaningful words that you shared with hopefully anybody who has children who's listening is that we can always tell them what they should do, but the most biggest difference is what are they watching us do?
yeah, that was key. We're going to take another break, Kate. We have so much yummy stuff coming up, my friends. So we'll be right back. I am with Kate Rose, author of Written in the Stars. Visit her at wordsofkaterose.com and, of course, grab a copy of her new book. We'll be right back.
Within you is the ability to consciously choose your thoughts and decisions. Making conscious choice transforms everything from your day-to-day experiences to the direction your life takes and the achievement of your dream life. Conscious Choices coach Mary McGuirk empowers and teaches her clients how to make conscious choices to align their thoughts, beliefs, and actions with the dreams and vision they hold for their life. As a master law of attraction coach and desire factor coach, Mary's unique methodology empowering the use of storytelling and her supportive, non-judgmental coaching style supports clients to understand where their predominant vibration is and how they can consciously choose, moment by moment, to create the outcomes they desire. Just beyond your everyday experiences, your heartfelt desires are calling you to life. Learn more at lifejustbeyond.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm with Kate Rose, author of Written in the Stars. We're talking about soulmate, karmic, and twin flame relationships, the journey of loving yourself. I have a question that might seem a little strange, but now I'm really curious. So I understand the soulmate, karmic, twin flame,
Mhm.
beautifully described. Can someone else in your life, all right, so can someone else in your life that you did have a relationship with view you in your relationship in a different way? Is that a clear question, or I can expand on it a little?
Would you
Because
expand on it a little bit? I think I know what you mean, but I just want to be sure.
okay, I'm gonna share something really that I'm still processing. I
Please.
might get emotional. So about 8 weeks ago, I got the call that my first boyfriend, and this wasn't just the first boyfriend, it was my first serious one. We were together 3 years. You're talking about like 17 to 21. And we traveled together, did everything together. And it was a wonderful relationship. But of course, I was not healed. He
Mhm.
was not healed. And I went on my way. Now, we've always stayed friends, but we
Mhm.
lost touch in the last probably 20 years. I have not seen him, haven't been connected with him. I got the news he passed away. I get
Oh, duh.
funeral, the wake, apologies, and was giving my mm, condolences to his mom and brother. And the brother said, he has not forgotten you. And he talked about you as he was passing. And I thought, oh, well, that's beautiful. And then there was a third woman in line. I didn't know who she was. Come to find out, it's been his partner, girlfriend for 10 years. And so I didn't know that though. And so I said, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And she goes, "I know who you are. You were the love of his life." And I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "You were the love of his life." I didn't know what to say to that. So 3 other people at the wake told me that. So part of me says, was that him staying in that energy of what he believed was a soulmate? Like, what was it
Mhm.
for him that we haven't, I'm 62 years old. We haven't been together for 45 years. And here he is talking about our relationship in real time as he's passing and to friends over the last few years. Is that, just so I can help understand it, is that him stuck in a memory? It was beautiful while it was there. It was a good relationship, but it was a kid relationship.
Of course.
He stuck Was he stuck energetically in one of those places, or was it real for him, even though he wasn't my twin flame? See what I mean? Like,
Absolutely. And honestly, I think it is both, because many times what I see with people is that they will kind of come into this lifetime, and let's say their soulmate might be their ultimate purpose in this lifetime. They might never gravitate on, they might never have numerous karmics or learn that lesson. And so for them, that soulmate is the highest love. There was a woman in her 70s that I spoke with who had 12 soulmates. And she had asked, she's like, is it so wrong if I stay with one? Um, so I think part of it is the fact that his potential purpose in this lifetime could have been to experience the soulmate as kind of that furthest type of love that he might receive. The other piece is that in that space, let's say the soulmate represents the child, potentially there was also maybe some limitations on how much maybe self development he was able to do, how much healing or growth he was able to do. And so he would also always kind of perceive that relationship with you as the love of his life if he really hadn't been able to necessarily grow and heal. And that also happens many times, really, at any stage. If we like who we are most in a particular relationship, then that is the relationship that we'll have a hard time getting over. So he also could have potentially really loved that version of himself that he was, even though it was childlike. Lots of hopes and dreams were just kind of beginning our adult life. So that combined possibly with his own path of growth and maybe even his sole purpose of it being a soulmate, it was real for him, but it doesn't mean that your path or your paths apart the last 40 so years was wrong. It means that he left the relationship same as you did, and whatever choices he made, that was kind of directed his life path where you went on and were able to meet your twin flame.
yeah, like I know completely that my path for the last 45 years is my path. You know what I mean? I don't look back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't look back that way. After his passing, I waited a few days and I had a beautiful conversation with him, thanking him for being such an important part of my life.
Hmm.
I believe our loved ones can always hear us.
I do
Um,
too.
but I remember thinking, because as I sat down, other people had heard that conversation, and they're like, "Linda, he still talked about you all these 20 years." And I remember going, what is the message in this for me? And I don't mean it from that personal soul level, but I felt like there was a message for me that, and my message that I took away is, we are always leaving an imprint of love on
Yes.
someone.
Yes.
Whether, so like that's the message I took away as a reminder that we always leave a beautiful energetic imprint with someone. And I want to be real conscious of what my imprint is moving forward. And he gave me a blessing. Like, my love mattered. He felt the love. Isn't that what we want for anyone that's in our life?
I completely agree. I mean, especially when we're talking about soulmates, many times we do stay friends with them, or we, remain co-parents, or even check in periodically. And that's almost why, many times, yes, the karmic relationship, sometimes we have to kind of go no contact depending on the situation. But even in all reality, I believe that love should make us better. And that also means that love should make those around us better. And so, if anything, him having those feelings and still speaking of you not only speaks to the imprint that you made on his life and that love, but just how meaningful and how much love can change someone's life and their energy.
Yeah, and that's the message, right? It was so I had to process that whole situation for a good 7 to 10 days going, "Okay, divine, what do you want me to learn from this?" And that is the lesson I came with. We are always leaving an imprint of love or other energy. Choose wisely, basically. And
Yes.
yeah, and so it was a beautiful gift, and but I was curious of, like, where that meant he was. So let's go on. So you say there's a choice to part ways with a soulmate is the beginning of the journey to learn who you are. And you explain that process as we enter the karmic cycle, right? A
Yeah.
karmic relationship, I mean. That's when we choose ourselves and move on. Can we also, though, discover our true selves if we choose to stay with our soulmate and not move into a karmic relationship? That's a big one.
It is a big one. And having that question be asked of, one, can someone be all three loves? Or can our soulmate end up becoming our twin flame? And many times when this question is being asked, it's when we are in the karmic relationship and we are still operating from that place of thinking that we need to work in order to earn love, or that we can control. We just have to do something different or be something more, and maybe this relationship could last. But in all reality, these three types of loves are really so vastly different. If we have our purpose, if we choose to stay with our soulmate, as I ended up kind of discovering in my research, many of our grandparents, great grandparents, and so on did, it doesn't mean that life will be horrible or awful or that there won't be love. It just means that potentially in this lifetimes, that was your purpose. But once we, let's say, transition out of the karmic, even if we're in that, let's say, single or time where we're consciously being alone, once we're there, we no longer actually want the karmic to be part of the soulmate or part of the twin flame relationship. And they really do, if we say the first relationship is about truth, that's what opens the doorway to be able to learn about the karmic lessons. We might go through our lifetime never really healing our inner child. But if we do, that obviously creates a very dramatic and different result for the rest of our life.
Yeah, and so I'm like, there's so many layers to this. I can't wait to finish your
Yes.
book. I'm looking at the time going, all right, what do we have time for here? So we're going to take a final break and come back for the last segment. And when we do, I want to ask you what advice you would offer to someone who continues to attract the wrong kind of person. And we all know somebody like that. I was that person.
Me as well, Linda.
Yeah. So we'll be back in a moment with the amazing Kate Rose. Visit her at wordsofkaterose.com. We'll be back in a moment.
Inner peace, joy, and fulfillment are yours, even if they feel out of reach. When you learn to befriend your shadow emotions instead of avoiding or stuffing them, you free yourself of self sabotaging patterns, beliefs, and habits that keep you from living your most authentic life. As a life transitions coach, professional certified coach, certified RIM facilitator, IPEC Energy Leadership Master Practitioner, and Human Design Consultant, Mary Jo Rathgeb intuitively and compassionately supports women to shine a light on their shadow emotions so they can reclaim the energy and wisdom contained within. This sacred work frees women to be who they really are and not someone they think they are supposed to be, and empowers them to live a life that aligns with their deepest truth. Learn more at maryjorathgeb.com.
You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm Linda Joy, and with me today is Kate Rose, author of Written in the Stars. So, Kate, I know I've been there, as you shared in the last segment, you've been there, but what advice would you offer to someone who continues to attract the wrong kind of person?
That is absolutely, I think, one of the hardest spaces to be in because we want to be choosing differently. Nobody wants to be attracting the same person over and over again. Actually, when we are in those spaces, the number one thing that we can do for ourselves is to consciously choose to be single for a period of time. This is really kind of the most important piece because as long as we're continuing to engage with others or online dates or even have casual relationships, we're still mixing our energy with somebody else. We're still giving ourselves something else to focus on, be distracted by, or even that external validation. So if we find ourselves and we're saying, okay, I've literally felt like I've been dating three people who are exactly the same and they all turn out the same, that's kind of the universe letting you know that to take space for yourself, to embrace being with yourself. And then when we are, it's trying to be as honest as we can about what do these partners have in common with what we've been through and experienced when we were younger, because that's where the answer always lays. Whether it's the emotionally unavailable man that we're chasing or the woman who, let's say, is inconsistent or whatever it might be, whatever pattern that we're seeing in our romantic life of feeling like we can't choose the right one or attract the right one, it goes back to that aspect of what we experienced when we were younger. Once we are aware of that, then the joy and potentially some of the challenge comes from learning to give that to ourselves. So if we're saying, okay, we're seeking unavailable people or we're attracting them rather, then in that case, it would be to look at, are we giving ourselves all of the love that we desire? Are we being emotionally available? Are we being vulnerable? Are we able to advocate for our needs? And so it's always that aspect of any pattern, anything that we're attracting into our lives is always a mirror. But in order to really receive the benefit of it, we need time by ourselves to be able to go into that process more deeply.
It's so clear, and it is an inner journey, isn't it? It's like, everything that comes into our life is a reflection of what
Yes.
we are struggling with internally, even if we're not conscious of it.
And I think seldom are we conscious of it. I mean, nobody would say, "Oh, I didn't have a great relationship with my father. I'm going to date four men that are just like him." Nobody's consciously aware of that.
I love
None of
that.
us would do it, and that's why it is the journey within. I truly believe, and the biggest part is that we can have, our brains. I always say our brains are conditioned all the time to keep us safe, but many times what that means is safe equals similar. And that's where we get into those patterns of repeating the same relationship over and over again, or even having big challenges in admitting the truth of what we experienced or what we've been through. So, recognizing and being able to keep ourselves safe, to choose a different romantic partner, to choose ourselves, to choose time alone is all about reprogramming that brain so that we don't keep seeking what has previously hurt us.
Yeah, and I think all of us can relate. I know you said you could too, is
Yes.
I chose a lot of those in my younger years especially, and, you look back and I can see now because 'cause I've done a lot of spiritual development work for the last 30 years, but I look back and go, "Ah, so that's what it was with him." You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
see the lessons and the blessings from every relationship because I have that lens now of viewing it from a higher purpose, I guess, because I wanna see, I wanted to witness my own journey over the
Yes.
last all these years, so and when I look back, I don't look back at judgment, even though I made some hell of a mistakes in my life. I no longer look at any mistake or even my relationships with judgment. I look at it as, "Oh," it's like information.
And that's so important. And that's again kind of where that piece ties in of how to love or care for ourselves. If we're not going to judge a child for not learning how to tie their shoes more quickly, how are we going to judge ourselves for learning our lessons? So being able to look back, not just have the lesson and the blessing, which I truly believe all relationships have, even if it's, let's say, more challenging to decipher what that is, but not having judgment for the self because as long as we are judging ourselves or holding on to shame or guilt from why didn't we see it sooner, or I wish I would have known, or I should have known, then we're not really loving ourselves. We're still thinking that we should have known something before we were taught it.
Yeah, that's powerful. Releasing the judgment of my past mistakes and past relationships, I think was one of the top 4 healing gifts I gave myself.
Hmm.
The shame and self-judgment, I just, um, that weighed heavy on me for a long time, and so I wanna go over a couple chapters because as we
Please.
come to the last few minutes, I was looking because you got the book broken down into 3 sections: soulmate, karmic, and twin flame relationships. But I was noticing one of the chapters is exactly what we're talking about, healing your childhood wounds through the stars, which is
Yes.
under karmic relationships. And I love that you also give, because this speaks to who I am, like you have affirmations for the karmic for
Yes.
every section, affirmations, and you saw the shirt I'm wearing today, so
I
you know
know.
I love, and you have moon rituals for each of these 3 relationships. Talk about why it was important to you to bring that in, because I was immediately drawn to that.
Oh, thank you. I am a huge believer and I also practice affirmations myself, and I think it really does speak to that aspect of we are always listening to ourselves. We are, whether it's our internal dialogue, our thoughts. And so the affirmations allow us to feel empowered, but also to eventually help change any sort of negative or hurtful self-dialogue that actually isn't even part of our authentic self. It was placed there by someone or something else. So having the affirmations, I feel like, is a big part of being able to be in the situation, be in wherever relationship you're at, but still being open to the lessons. And the aspect of the moon rituals, I think more and more people are feeling a connection to the universe and to kind of so many, let's say, ancient modalities like astrology, and having these moon rituals, especially the moon, because it really governs over our emotional body, which is so connected to these relationships. It's a way to not only move through, let's say, a clearing or a letting go or setting an intention for a twin flame, but it also helps us to connect to something bigger than just our lives, just where we are. And we're able to realize that there's going to be so many of us that are setting intentions on the new moon, that are clearing out the old and connecting to overall that natural world around us, which, if we're going through any sort of relationship challenge, we know that feeling alone is a big part of that. And so by connecting, by doing the moon rituals, we're able to embrace more of that divine connection that I think is among all of us.
This speaks to my soul, girl.
Ah, I
Uh,
love it.
yeah, I run my business by the moon cycles.
Yes.
I own Inspired Living University, which is like a sacred community and curriculum for women. It's a private membership,
Love
and the last few months they get an affirmation video that is so stunning with an affirmations poster for whatever the theme is for the month. That's how much I believe in affirmations. But I want to go back into the book because I'm looking like in the chapter on karmic relationships, you have the affirmations. Then you have the moon rituals. You have the full moon release ritual, which I love because I believe let's release with the cycles. So I'm always doing
absolutely.
that. And then I love that you have like healing crystals in that section too. And then you have the new moon intention ritual with those crystals. So I'm like, oh my God, she's speaking my love language.
I love it as well. And, even, there's crystals, and just by tapping it in, again, these are energies that are around us all the time, and realizing that, as humans, we are more than just bones and flesh. We are energy, we are spirit. And that is what connects us to the moon, to the crystals, to one another. And so whether it's, using amethyst or rose quartz or obsidian at times, and also, honoring the aspect that plants and herbs can even add to those rituals. I think there's so much of it that the more we feel connected to the earth, the more connected we end up becoming to ourselves.
It's been a big part of my healing,
Mine
to
as
be
well.
out in nature and follow the cycles of nature. So I was thrilled to see that in the book when I received it a few weeks ago. As we come to the end of our conversation, I want to invite everyone that's listening. You're here for a reason. You were attracted to this conversation because there's a message in it for your journey, for your healing. And I want to invite you to visit Kate at wordsofkaterose.com. Grab a copy of her newest book, Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships, as well as her first book, You Only Fall in Love Three Times. Check out everything that she has going on. Check out her offerings, connect with her on social media, because I have so loved this conversation. There is so much wisdom contained within her book, and the work she's doing. So please stay connected with her. And Kate, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, my friend.
My heart feels so grateful. Thank you so much, Linda.
You're welcome. And until next time, my friends, choose love, choose joy, choose to believe in miracles, my friend. Blessings, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.